Hello. So the third of the miscellaneous topics we'll discuss today is handling application settings. Um, we have settings in all our apps. You may want to change how things are displayed. You may want to enable, disable certain features, etc. And that's where this application settings come into picture. Settings, also called preferences. So you may get a hint that shared preferences are somewhere in the in the mix here, and that would be correct. So it handles um, uh, application settings using shared preferences. Android has special activities or fragments to deal with that, and that's what we'll look at in this particular video. Okay, so as you know, settings allow users to change functionality and behavior of an application. um, Things like how often the application can synchronize data with the cloud, or download stuff from the um, from the net or something like that. It can also change the contents and presentations of the user interface. The dark mode and the light mode is a simple example. um, in an email app, you may want to use a certain signature, or not want to use a certain signature. These are other examples um, of using preferences and and settings. Um, with Android 10, now it has the Android X preference library, and that is the recommended way of handling preferences and settings in Android. So it manages the basically it um, this library manages the user interface, um, and it can let you interact with the storage in a really flawless, seamless way. So it's easy to set individual settings and configure them very easily now. All right, so example. So here's what is called a preference hierarchy. You create a hierarchy of preferences in XML. Of course, you can do that in Java as well. So this file must be stored in a res XML folder. Okay, what do we see here? The root element of this must be preference screen, by the way, um, and it inside it has different preference elements. So first you have a switch preference compat, which has a switch button, so it can go true or false. It says whether it should enable notifications, and then it has a send feedback, um, where the summary, which is sort of a subtitle, says report technical issues or suggest new features. Okay, so this XML creates that sort of a UI for you. Each of these preferences must have a unique key. That key is like the ID, and we'll see soon how you can retrieve the preference using that particular key. Okay, so creating something like that is easy using the wizard for creating settings activity or fragment. If you go to File, New, Activity, you'll see like the empty activity, basic activity, etc. And you'll also see a settings activity or a settings fragment. So here the screenshot is for settings fragment. If you go to File, New, Fragment, etc. Okay, you do that and it produces the boilerplate code for you. It gives you the the basic XML. Then it gives you the fragment created and puts in the code at the appropriate place. So the fragment or activity is available. Of course, you'll have to add the code to load that fragment or activity at the appropriate time. Okay. Yeah, and um, in many apps, we use this. You go to settings via the options menu. You have already seen how to deal with options menu, and you can basically, if you are using settings activity, you can basically have an explicit intent that goes there when you click the settings button from the options menu. All right. So what do you do with the hierarchy? Of course, you inflate it in your Java code so that you can access stuff. So here is an example. When you do that, you have to extend the preference fragment compat. This code is produced by the wizard as well for you. So these lines are not a big deal. You'll get it by default. Um, um, and here, what you are seeing is on create preferences is the overloaded method, in which you specify which is the preference XML you want to inflate. Okay, but this is how you would do it. Um, okay, and then in your settings activity, which is a regular app compat activity in this case, um, you just simply attach the fragment, um, like you would do with any other fragment. So this second piece of code is no is shouldn't be surprising, shouldn't be new to you at this point. Um, this is the first one is the new part where you extend the preference fragment compat and inflate the hierarchy. Okay, you must have seen the preferences grouped together like this. There are a couple of ways of showing the preferences in an organized way to the user. One of them is creating preference categories. So this is a very simple example. You have only one in each category, so perhaps not that imposing, but let's see. You create a preference category, give it a title, in this case notifications, and then your individual preference items, they became children of the preference category. Similarly, you have a title help preference category, and it has the feedback element. Okay. Um, you can again create this in Java, but make sure you create and initialize the preference category first before adding any preferences. Um, unlike in a lot of other XML, it may make sense to create some of the preferences dynamically because some of them depend on the features that your app has enabled or disabled based on the behavior of the user. Okay. Um, the other way of organizing preferences is to use multiple screens. So if you have a long list of preferences, you want to use screens, and I won't go into the details of that. You'll find the information on the online documentation. Okay. Um, so next, how do you handle settings change? What happens when some setting changes? So first of all, in your on create preferences, after you inflate the hierarchy, you can then start grabbing the preferences by calling find preference method and passing it the string that is the key of that. So here you're passing signature. Email app signature is an edit text preference because you can put in your text in there, and this is how you'll grab it. Um, and then you can handle it by getting the text out of it and using it in your compose email activity or fragment. By the way, kind of continuing the point on the last slide, you can make certain preferences visible or invisible based on certain features um, dynamically, and you can have the preference made invisible in the XML to begin with, like this. Um, um, and then make them visible by calling set preference visible in your Java code. Examples of preferences that you may want to hide would be, say, some pro or paid features in your app and preferences related to that, or preferences that should be shown only when in a game app, only when the user has reached a certain level and unlocked certain features of the game app. Okay, these are just some examples. Okay, handling the preference actions. One, you can handle intents through the Java code like it shows here, um, by setting the activity preference set intent, or in the XML itself by providing the intent action here. So let's say one of the preferences wants you to go to some other activity and you know set some change, make some changes there, come back here, something like that. Like say getting a user profile picture from some other part of your device, like the camera app or the gallery app. So that's where you can do that. Simply launch the intent and deal with the result once it's back. Okay. Uh, the other way of handling changes or actions is to set a listener. So you can set on preference change listener, which takes a method, takes the preference and the new value of that changed one. Here I'm using it on a switch preference. So I'm calling it is checked, either true or false, right? And simply showing a log message that preference now switch to whatever that value is. And if it is true, do something. There could be an else. If it is false, do something else. So you can set listeners to your individual preferences and handle them. This code will also go like, yeah, like right here in the on create preferences, for example. All right. Yes. So preferences, as the name suggests, it internally handles shared preferences, and shared preferences are private for your app. So they basically deal with and handle. I mean, they are accessible only to your app, and that's a very nice, safe way of keeping the data that persists over device rotation, device reboot, and process death, and all other things. So you want the settings to persist like this. So that's what you get here. Okay. Now, finally, quick examples of um, handling the shared preferences. So um, you can start using them in your app. We'll use it in the upcoming assignment, in fact. Okay, so let's say you have a switched preference compat called notifications, like in the example, where it enables notifications for, say, new email or new messages. Um, and since it's a switch preference, it clicking on that basically puts a boolean whose key is notifications, the same key as this one, and the value true or false based on what is clicked in your private shared preferences for this particular app. So that is what happens by simply providing this element. You don't have to add any other additional code. You don't have to deal with, you don't have to have a click listener to see what is happening there. Um, and you can then in the Java code, you can grab that default preference using the activity context and get the value for showing notifications by doing a get boolean and passing it the key, right? And then based on this value, you can write your code, whether it should show notifications or not. There are so we basically saw the text one, the intent one, and the switch one. There are a few others. You can have a radio list, you can have checkboxes, and a few other types of preferences in the default library, Android X preferences library. I'll leave those details to you for you to look on the documentation. Okay, thank you.